Welcome to the Kitsap Literary Artists and Writers and its monthly author showcase. I'm your host, Mark Miller. Today, from Bainbridge Island, we have author Jennifer Wilhoit. She's visiting us this month at the Bremerton Kitsap Access Television Studios. Jennifer writes inspiring books about creativity and nature. Welcome to our broadcast for Kitsap Literary Artists and Writers. I would like to shake hands.
Thank you so much for having me today.
Okay. We're going to start out here real quick. You have a degree in environmental studies. How did this lead you to become a writer? Because that's, to me, when I hear environmental studies, I hear this, boy, that's a degree, you know. So how did you wind up in writing?
So in graduate school, as you know, we have to do a lot of writing. That's part of the passing of the tests to get the degree. And as I started doing that and also working in an interdisciplinary field, I realized, oh my gosh, I have been writing. I'd wanted to be a writer since I was 12 years old and never had the courage to really say that I am. And so once I was in grad school and doing a lot of writing and starting to get little publications here and there, I realized, oh yeah, I really am. I'm writing. But most of all, I think it taught me how to think. Grad school taught me how to be a critical thinker and a decent researcher, and I bring those skills very much to bear on my writing now. So
you're writing, but like for Ph.D.s and stuff, and I did it in government when I was in law enforcement, you're writing criminal complaints, you're writing factual stuff and everything. So then now you're trying to write, though, more for the general public. And I guess what I was kind of get at is how did you make that transition from writing Ph.D. and, you know, like you said, you know, going before a committee and pushing your ideas and stuff and everything so they'll give you a Ph.D. and then writing out for the general public? Well,
thank you for asking. That's a really good question. And I think it was really a process that took a number of years. Part of it was I was in a life transition, having finished grad school, but not having moved into this next thing that I'm doing now. And so I had a lot of time to journal and write and explore on the page what was happening for me in the world and personally. And so I started making the translation that way. But I have to also say that in my doctoral work, I was encouraged by a mentor, a committee chair, who really was not into the academies, and I kept wanting to use all those words I knew, and she kept saying, no, why don't you write for a friendlier audience? And so I got some good practice. The master's degree had been very academic speak, and by the time I got into the doctoral work, the concepts were more elaborate or complex, but my writing was becoming more accessible. And over time, I've really had to kind of offer my writing out to people, friends and family, and then the world, and get some feedback. And that's how I made that transition.
So would you say bureaucracy has a tendency of sometimes stifling creativity?
I think it allowed me to be creative in a different way. But now I just, particularly the book that I just have out, my third book, Writing on the Landscape, I really just decided to write it how I wanted to write it and to let all the other voices go, and that was very freeing and wonderful.
And now that you've mentioned your book, most authors get stuck. You know, we have what they call writer's block. And this book specifically deals with how to get us unstuck when we're having problems writing it, because we have this expression that when you write a book, it becomes your baby. It's like giving birth. And so if you have writer's block, I can imagine then you're going into labor for 4 days. So then kind of explain how you help us get unstuck from this writer's block.
So my practice of working with people, so I'm an author, and then I have this business, Tila Stories, where I work with people, and mostly I work one-on-one, though I also go to conferences and make presentations and do workshops and that kind of thing in groups of varying sizes. But mostly when I'm working with a writer who's stuck, or a person who's stuck in a life issue, which is also work I do, we meet one-on-one, and I first of all just have to listen to where they are and what's going on, and then using all of the tools and all of the practices, from a number of different disciplines, including ecology and the natural world, and just try things until we find what works. And so my clients learn to be very honest about this thing you offered, this really worked, this other thing not so much. And so over a period of time, we're able to gently, slowly, easily move them into writing. And for some, you know, maybe they've written part of a book and they're stuck and they don't know where to go next. And so I'm able to just get them writing, even free writes on a page, and that can sometimes just be enough to loosen people out of the stuck
And of course,
place.
this applies not only to fiction but nonfiction. Doesn't matter what you're writing.
Exactly, exactly.
So when you're utilizing, I guess, your experience with the environment out here and everything, getting people to go out and experience nature as a means to help, like you said, kind of, I guess you'd call it jumpstart a little bit of creativity, get them going again. That's kind of like, I guess I would say, it was one of your bases for what you're trying to do.
Yes, and I really believe that connection we make, so I facilitate experiences, I guide experiences where people can have an experience out in the natural world, however small. Or I bring the natural world to them in the form of photos I've taken of the natural world, or objects from nature, up into boardrooms and skyscrapers in the city of San Francisco. I've actually done this. And to either bring the nature to them or to take people out into the natural world, once they connect and once they have an experience that they can make meaning of, a little story, then they've connected back with something in themselves and they're able to tap into the creativity that is the natural world.
Let me put a little bit on, I like to put people on the hot seat. So when you're in front of a boardroom and you're actually sitting there, like you said, trying to explain this to you, what has been some of the initial reaction? Because you've got people there that maybe they're sitting there and they're making 5-6 figures and they're worried about making their next big sale or their next big stock option or whatever, and then you're trying to do this. What has been kind of some of the initial reaction and then the reaction later on once they kind of get your idea of what you're trying to do?
So a lot of people, the second part, answering the second part of that is that often people will see, oh my gosh, there was something, there was a connection that I was able to make between this pine cone I chose for this particular writing activity that you wanted us to do. And the first part is, you know, I've had attorneys and mediators and people who have a very, you know, they're not out putting their hands in the mud every day like I am.
Yeah.
And so sometimes there's a little bit of wondering, but often what I do, rather than going into some conceptual explanation, which doesn't ring true for a lot of people, is just providing and facilitating an experience. And then people go, oh, yeah, something happened there. It might be tiny, but something happened.
So your overall journey led you to form Tila Stories. I probably just mutilated that name.
It's Teal Arbor Stories.
Teal
yes.
Arbor Stories.
Yes.
Okay, pardon me.
It's okay.
Explain what this is and how you relate to the challenges any of us have in writing, in the writing world.
So we talk a lot, we writers talk a lot about writing for outcome. I'm going to write this book, I'm going to write this essay, I'm going to write this blog, I'm going to write X, Y, and Z. But really what I do, people come to me and they say, yeah, I think I want to write my memoir, or I have this novel and I'm kind of stuck and I don't know what to do next. As it turns out, though, it's really about writing process that is the thing that people get stuck with. Maybe they don't know how to balance, they don't have a good work-life balance, they don't know how to deal with the things that happen to us on a day-to-day basis, people getting sick or financial worries or whatever. And so I'm able to help people, walk with people through those experiences. To offer them tips and suggestions and practices that I use. And so it's really, the work I do is very therapeutic and very process-oriented toward an outcome for some people. I have a number of clients, one of them you interviewed on the show, who have actually written and then published their books and memoirs and novels. But mostly what I do is really work with people in the process. I love doing that.
Then I guess the question I would have is, how did you wind up from environmental sciences into what to me, like you used the word therapeutic, sounds like definitely more of a therapeutic bent. I don't see environmental scientists running out and all of a sudden, you know, could you sit down and talk to me about how do you feel about this? You know, I always see them, you know, beakers and test tube and all that stuff. So how did you manage to get that connection there?
So two pieces. One is that my degree, my environmental studies degree, was very, very interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary,
okay.
and so I was really focused on looking at how people who are creative, in this particular case artisans, using their hands to make beautiful handcrafts, what their connection is with the natural world. And so when I started working with people in this context of Teal Arbor Stories, it was a very small leap to have them using nature imagery and nature objects in their own, going out and walking in landscapes to find that place of healing and wholeness. So those weren't words I used in my PhD program, but I was really already on that path. And then the second thing is, in between the PhD work and this work I'm doing now, I had the opportunity to assist with some wilderness guiding. Some people going out into wilderness landscapes for 4 days and 4 nights doing the extreme, what they call vision fasting or vision questing. And so in listening to the really deep, powerful stories and seeing the transformations that happened for people, not only was I touched by that and having gone out on my own, but also I was able to realize that not everybody's going to go out and not eat with no shelter alone for 4 days and 4 nights in Death Valley. So how can I make something that's more accessible for folks? And so that's what I'm doing now. We might be at a local park, or we might be at an arboretum, or in a garden space.
Did you deal with the Native American populace, especially around the Northwest?
I have some, but my work is really pan-cultural, pantheistic, and so I really try to meet people where they are rather than imposing some kind of structure or religion or spiritual perspective. Because my job is to help you or whoever where you are, not to
if
give
you
you
ask my partner in crime, Peter, there's no help from me. So most authors that we've met are driven to become known in the world of storytelling. You know, we love publicity. But your book has another set of goals. Could you kind of tell us about those goals?
Yes, in particular, this book, Writing on the Landscape, it really, as I was thinking and preparing for this interview, I realized what I really want is to give people practices that they can use to become lifelong writers, whether it's journaling or novel writing or books or memoir for their grandkids. And also to really inspire people. That's what I really am trying to do, I think. Though I didn't really know that when I wrote the book.
Well, for us especially, because we all came from different career fields, when you get into the writing later in life, it's quite often a big change from your original career. Have you uncovered anything in your life since, I guess you kind of made a transition, but you're still using some of your tools? But what is that kind of your life, something in your life that writing itself has exposed?
So my answer to that is very long and varied, but in short, I will say I've gotten answers to things, including how to put together a website and what the pieces are to convey to an audience, to insights, to self-understanding, healing. I think through writing with my hand, literally my hand with a pen in it across the page, I learn about myself and I learn about the world. And then now, having some years practice now, decades doing that, I'm able to take those experiences and offer them now back to the world. So I'm not just taking and learning from myself, but I'm able to offer this out to other people.
So we as writers, we create characters. And in fact, one of the things that I say, and some of the other people I work with say the same thing, characters take on a life of their own, and they start, I say they come from an alternate universe and get into our brains and won't let it go. So then how do you explain, in reference to the characters, in reference to utilization and becoming kind of one with nature, and how that affects the ability of the writers, you know, to craft their stories and things like that?
So There's this huge, as I call it in this book, a treasure trove of inspiration and awe and lessons and learning in the natural world. And so if we can expose ourselves a little bit in a way that feels comfortable enough, maybe pushing an edge a little bit, I think we can access even the voices of our characters for people who are writing fiction. Also, I feel that we're already connected to the natural world. We are already nature. We need to eat and we get sick and ultimately we pass away. And so my job, as I see it, really one of them is to help people have an experience where they remember, oh yeah, right, I am nature. Oh yes, right, I'm like that bluebird over there or like that seal in the water. And just making that small little connection then allows people to have a little insight into themselves. And I do think that when we can see something about ourselves, it helps our writing.
And that brings kind of like a little fascinating subject, is that something I've noticed is, I personally think that because we have a very complicated human culture, you know, worldwide human culture, we forget that we're animals first. And we forget that connection, and that's when I write in my books, I try to point out the fact that, hey guys, we can sit there and we can think about how we've got a bigger brain, we make tools, you know, but we forget we're animals. We're connected with nature. Nature has an effect on us. We have an effect on nature. We should be more even rather than we have a tendency of saying, well, we're up here, nature's down here, and so therefore, you know, we're going to try to control things, failing to realize that we're actually part of nature.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And would you say, though, when you were going with your studies in the environmental sciences, what was kind of the attitude towards that? In other words, was it more people you worked with very technical? Like I said, I always think of people going out and taking water samples and going back with a test tube and going, oh my God, we've ruined that lake, you know, as opposed to, like you said, going out and kind of feeling like you're one. I mean, how was your experience with that type of culture within the environmental science?
In my cohort of people, in my PhD cohort,
Yeah.
I was very blessed to be with people who are passionate about the natural world and their connection to it, people who are out having experiences such as I've talked about in this interview. And so really, whether they were taking water samples or counting fish or looking at ecotherapy, or myself, artisans and conservation, we all were doing it from this fun foundation of love for the natural world. And so there was very little of that, you know, domination and conquer of the natural world, and very much we're all in this together. What's our little part and how can we help?
Well, do you see, this kind of gets back to our connection with like you said, is nature and everything. What do you actually see, I guess, the next step with humankind as this big block that we have within the environment, within what we call the natural world, which is actually just the world, but we like to put titles on stuff.
Right.
How do you see us going forward, you know, the effects and stuff we're going to have on and the effect it's going to have on us?
So I don't know if I'm going to exactly answer your question,
Yeah.
but I will say that as I was driving here today, I was reminded of technology and cell phones and cars and traffic and just the world we live in. Is the modern technological
Yeah.
world is so loud. So when we can
Okay.
go out in nature and feel nature's pace and nature's pulse, I think that matches that inner instinct, that creative instinct we have as writers, as artists. And so I just lost my train of thought, and maybe we can edit out my
It's okay.
just saying that.
Because you actually did answer the question. That's what I was kind of trying to get at, was we're sitting here as human beings, and like I said, we have a tendency of forgetting that we are still part of quote-unquote nature.
Right.
We as human beings, because of the way we organize things, we like to pigeonhole everything. And so that's, I guess, that's kind of fascinating with what you're doing is you're trying to tell people, at least in kind of my opinion, and you can tell me if I'm full of crap, is that you're sitting there telling people, hey, literally slow down and smell the roses a little bit, because we're getting too wrapped up in the day-to-day technology and news feeds and politics and what's going on all over the place and everything, as opposed to sitting back and going, you forget where we came from. We started out on the savannas of Africa, and we forget that that's still a part of us.
And I do see that there are moments where I do tell that to people, but mostly I'm trying to create a space where people can just experience that and come to say it themselves. To feel that and to have that direct, tangible connection. Because when we're in our cars and when we're in our houses, it's really easy to forget. It's easy to forget that we're really actually part of, as you keep saying.
Rather than telling people, you want to lead people so they can experience it themselves.
And then they say, oh my gosh, right, yeah, I had a man say to me, a person I was working with a few months ago, I mean, I'm working with him now, a few months ago he said, oh my gosh, I am like that tree over there. And in describing the characteristics of the tree, he was able to see how those same attributes translated into who he is and what he was experiencing in that moment.
Who publishes your books right now, and do you have any marketing secrets, which goes back to our non-natural world?
So this book is sort of self-published. I have 2 prior books that are with a boutique academic publisher. They're not very accessible just because of the price point, though they are on Amazon. And I have some current book projects that I'm working on, and a co-author and I right now are talking about what we're going to do for the next ones. But I have a lot of book chapters and blogs and guest blogs and articles I write that are published in all kinds of different venues.
And so, dovetailing into that, what type of events and stuff do you have coming into the future in the next few months?
I have a ton of things coming in the next few months. I have workshops, I have book readings, I have a retreat coming up, I have a few in-service and trainings, and yes.
So if a book club or other organization wanted to invite you to speak, or anybody just wanted to get a hold of you in reference to your expertise and experience, how would they get a hold of you?
So the best way to find me, to actually reach me, is through email, and there's a contact form on my website at Teal Arbor Stories, and people can find me there. And I do understand that maybe some words are floating above my head right now with the links.
Once again, human technology is being what it is.
Wonderful.
You're having all these little floating little notices up there. Kind of then, in your writing itself, what's kind of next on your agenda in writing? Are you, I take it primarily you write nonfiction, but have you ever thought of also going and maybe writing a fictional story, tried to get some of your stuff across?
I did when my nieces and nephews were young, and I actually have a nephew having a birthday today and a niece having a birthday tomorrow. When they were young, I wrote stories for them, children's stories, based on, of course, the natural world. I don't do that anymore. I'm pretty much a nonfiction writer now.
So when are you going to publish the children's stories? Because we need more children's stories.
Yes, maybe we'll be waiting for the grandkids to come or something. But yes, I'm working on several book projects now, one with a co-author and a couple others that I'm working.
So do you have any other additional advice for a writer starting out that you'd like to share?
I would just want to say, if you want to write, go with that passion and follow that and prioritize your writing, nourish yourself and your writing, and don't let those critics stop you. Just turn down the voices on the critics, those inside you and those outside, and follow your passion.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Jennifer.
Thank you so much, Mark. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for sharing everything you have with the literary world, and you have kind of a unique way of looking at things, and of course you have a very unique book too. So one thing we have here at BCAT and KLAW, we all have a passion for writing. I would like to invite you to kind of come to one of our Kitsap Literary Artists and Writers meetings, one of these Wednesday nights that we meet, so that as we continue working together and talking together, maybe we might actually even get you to even host one of these shows, because I think it would be fascinating if you came in here and discussed with somebody, okay, this is how you could break your writer's block and maybe do a little mini presentation on what your book is actually about. At least I would think that would be very interesting to the BCAT audience out here, because we've got a lot of people out there writing, and there's probably a lot of people out there with writer's blocks right now. So, I would like to thank all of our viewers for tuning into Bremerton Kitsap Access Television and viewing this Kitsap Literary Artists and Writers production. I also wish to thank once again the BCAT staff on cameras and in the director's chairs. Our broadcast is scheduled for Saturday evenings at 6 p.m. on Wave Cable Channel 3 and Comcast Channel 12. You can also view a live stream on the BCAT website. Keep in touch with our Facebook and web pages to discover where you can meet local authors and artists. I hope everyone has a pleasant evening and a productive and fascinating week. Until next Saturday, I am Mark Miller with Kitsap Literary Artists and Writers in conjunction with Bremerton Kitsap Access Television. Good night. And once again, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hopefully this was the experience you were looking for.
This was wonderful.